Okay. Okay. So we'll get started. So I'd like to, first of all, start off by welcoming everybody that was able to join us today. This is hopefully the first of many sessions around cybersecurity for healthcare, for doctors, for clinicians that we plan to do. But this is the inaugural one. So again, thank you for taking the time. I'd like to introduce myself first. My name is Gerard DeFreitas. I am the Director of Marketing and Business Development for Source 44. Source 44 Security is obviously a security consulting company out of the Toronto area. We provide cybersecurity solutions, some consulting services and implementation services. I'll allow Ian to introduce himself.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend our education session. It's great to have you all here. I'm Ian Patterson. I am the CEO of Cycura, which is also a cybersecurity consulting company, also part of the Well Health umbrella of companies. Unlike Source 44, we are not a solutions company. We're primarily a security consulting technical assessment type company. So you pay us and we'll hack something for you and tell you how to fix it. That's kind of where we live and operate.
That's great. Do you want to tell them a little bit about, this, obviously they're seeing Well Health and maybe the relationship with Well Health and why Well Health is doing this, this initiative?
Sure, I'd love to. So Well Health actually was originally a customer of Cycura. We were helping Well with M&A assessment work a couple of years back. And as Well was growing up and acquiring new companies to merge into the organization, we were looking at the cyber readiness, cyber security sanity of these companies and the products that they made, primarily SaaS type applications or sometimes EMRs and things like that. So that's how our relationship with Well started. Well, if you're familiar with them or if you're not, are a large conglomerate of kind of 6 different business units that kind of cover the end-to-end telehealth, telemedicine, EMR, traditional EMR, billing and back office, clinical, and then there's this nascent, small little cybersecurity unit right now that is 2 companies. And why we're part of Well and why it's important. This industry, healthcare, health tech, is one of the most highly targeted industries for cyber attacks, as you'll see in the slides that we'll present. And Well felt it was so important to have expertise internally and that can be offered out to other health tech companies or healthcare businesses. And so it kind of made sense to take companies that you already knew and worked with, like Cycura and Source 44, and bring them under the umbrella and build a practice around that. So we do work for our parent company, and we also do work outside of our parent company with other health tech and healthcare companies. And we also, Cycura and Source 44 both also service large multinationals like Loblaw and other companies like that too. But we have a really strong understanding of the needs, requirements, and importance of healthcare, specifically around cybersecurity. And that's why we wanted to put these sessions together actually to talk about it, because our experience really has been that while people understand it's important, they don't necessarily get down into the operational level of it and really understand it at the level that's appropriate. And so that's where we wanted to create these sessions.
And that's great. Thank you. So before we get started, I'm assuming everybody can see my screen, the Cybersecurity 101 for Clinic screen. Ian, can you see it?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to assume everybody else can see it. Okay, so before we begin, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. So number one is there's going to be a number of people on this call, so we obviously have everybody muted. If you do have a question, though, we do want to interact with you. So in the chat section or in the chat area, please, post your questions and we'll do our absolute best to get to all the questions. It may be at the end of the session, but we will definitely address the questions as we can, okay? Second thing is we've gamified this. So not only do we want to inform you, we also want to entertain you a little bit. So we decided to gamify this session a little bit. We have some, let's say, trivia type statistics around cybersecurity that I have for you. And it's a multiple choice. So basically, and I'm going to tell you how this works in a second, but basically, present you with a question. I'm going to give you the multiple choice answers. You pick your answer. The fastest person with the correct answer is going to get rated higher. And it's just, when you go to the movies and they have those games at the beginning of the movie, it kind of works just like that. So the person that scores the highest will win an Igloo BMX cooler, it's not for BMX bikes. It's just the name of it, but it's super cool. Okay, so this is the way it works. You can do this on your computer or you can do this on your phone, and you have two options here. You can take a picture of the barcode, and if you do, you will be taken to the site. It's going to ask you for your class ID and your full name. Class ID is in the top right corner there. It's 18611, and I will put that in the chat. And then put your full name. It helps if you have your full name in there so that, at the end of this, there's not 3 Mike M's. And we don't know who won. So put your full name, please. Okay. The other way you can do this is you can go to www.classpoint.app. Again, it's on the screen there. Same sort of thing. Just put in the class ID and put in your full name, and you can take part. So if you do happen to want to play the game, you are looking at this through your phone or through your screen on your computer, you can actually see all the slides there. So that way you're not flipping back and forth between Zoom. You can actually see everything within the app. So it works really seamless like that. If you don't want to participate in the game, that's cool. Just watch the slide deck as we go through it. And as I said, hopefully you get something out of this. But we really like to have that engagement and, as I said, entertain you a little bit. So we have 5 people registered. I'm going to give you another 30 seconds to do so. If you're having any issues, again, throw it up in the chat and I'd be more than happy to help you out. Okay. I'm going to put it in the chat here. Okay, all right, so 7 people, hopefully some more join. We do have a good number of people, 18 people participating, so hopefully some more people join as we go along. All right, but here we go. So this is the agenda, and Ian and I are co-hosting this, so we're going to bounce back and forth a little bit, but pretty much this is what we're going to talk about. So the threat to healthcare, specifically from a cybersecurity perspective. We're going to talk a little bit about terminology. We're going to give you a list of terms that you might be seeing, hearing, and Ian's going to go through some of those. Talk a little bit about social engineering, passwords, management of PHI, and your responsibility around PHI, and then give you an idea of some of the controls. Okay. After our session, we have Steve Hall joining us as well. He's CEO from William Osler Healthcare. He's going to be joining us. He's going to talk a little bit about his experience as an expert in the field and his perspective on what's happening in the healthcare industry as well. And I'll let Ian go deeper into that as we finish this particular presentation. Okay. All right. So we only have 7 people joined. Is that all that wants to play? It's good for the 7 people because less competition. Okay.
These are really sweet coolers too. They're like those ones that'll keep ice frozen for a whole weekend.
Exactly. Okay, here we go. So we're going to start off right out of the gate. Okay, so with some questions. So first question, and bear with me a little bit. I have like 3 screens going on here so I can see everything. But let's start off with the question. So what percentage of healthcare providers report having a fully functional cybersecurity program? So that's process, procedures, documentation, they put together a full package, okay? Let's start that up, okay. And here are your potential answers, Okay, so on your game screen, you're going to see option A, B, or C. Just pick the one you think is the right answer. Move that over here. Okay, so 5 people have voted. I'm gonna have to close it off because we have a whole bunch. Don't put your answers into the chat. Put your answer in the game itself. Okay, I'm gonna close that up, and I'm going to tell you the answer is A. Only 16% of healthcare providers have a fully functional, cybersecurity program. Okay. Next question. So Susanna, I see that you're trying to do this through the chat. If you go to www.classpoint.app, it's going to ask you for the class ID and put your full name in there, and it'll allow you to join the game. Okay. All right, next question. What percentage of healthcare providers had patient data lost or stolen in the past 2 years? Here are your options. I don't have the, we should have put the music from
Jeopardy.
From Jeopardy, that's it. Okay, so 4 people have voted, 5. All right, again, somebody's putting the answers into the chat, and that's not going to work for you. Okay, and the answer for that one is actually B. 89% of healthcare providers have claimed that they've been breached in some form. So that's a huge number, and this is the reason we're doing these events. Okay, so 1 second here. Okay. All right, last question in this batch, and then we actually go into some interesting information. How much is PHI sold for on the black market? And I'm pretty sure most people don't know what the black market is, but that's the dark part of the web where all the bad people are selling your information. Okay, and here are your options.
This is per record, by the way.
Per record, thank you. Just take a guess. I only see 4 people have voted. There we go. Okay. Okay, and the answer for that one is actually C. $363 per record is what that information goes for on the black market. And that is why PHI is so valuable these days. Okay. All right, I'm going to let Ian take over.
So talk about the threat to the healthcare industry. To give you guys a sense of background, as Gerard mentioned, Steve Hall is going to be joining. He's our kind of guest speaker tonight. Steve is actually my former boss in a previous role. I used to be the information security officer for a major hospital in the Greater Toronto area, about 8,000 employee hospital, 3 campuses. And I did that for about 5 years. And then after that, I was the director of security for an organization, a government agency called eHealth Ontario, where we had the medical records of around 13 million people from the province of Ontario, all stored in centralized systems. It was like a very large health network kind of setup where records were centralized and stored and shared, so that hospitals had direct access to them, whether they were part of the same network or not. So just to give you a sense of my background then and my understanding of this space. So when I talk about this stuff, I speak really from a lot of experience and hands-on experience trying to deal with and manage these risks to these records and healthcare environments. Healthcare suffered 2 to 3 times more attacks than any other industry in 2019. That got worse in 2020. During COVID, what we saw was this large shift of everybody working remotely, the decentralization of healthcare moving into the community, online telehealth, and it made it possible for attackers to go after easier targets that don't necessarily revolve around, say, a hospital network and hospital firewalls. Clinics were also put under tremendous pressure, obviously due to COVID and due to the care requirements of people and changes in how we were scheduling and adoption of new technology. And we saw a great uptick in attacks against healthcare. Primarily, those attacks were, as you see here, 4,000 ransomware attacks per day on average. Primarily, these attacks were ransomware, by which an attacker takes control of a network and completely encrypts the data so that you can't retrieve it, you can't do your business, and then they charge you a fee to restore that data, theoretically, if the restore even works. 89% of healthcare organizations have experienced a data breach in the past 2 years. That stat revolves a lot around cybersecurity incidents. There's also other types of incidents that would be classified as a cybersecurity incident, things like laptop stolen from the clinic or stolen from the trunk of someone's car that was left parked somewhere. And if that data is not encrypted, then that's still a cybersecurity incident. But the ransomware type of attacks as well too would count as that breach of data, especially with a lot of these attackers now stealing the data from the network first and then encrypting it. So they can either double charge you, or if you don't want to pay the ransom to decrypt it, they can still try and blackmail funds from the provider. Phishing attempts. So this is when somebody sends you a malicious email that looks like, hey, log into your Microsoft account here to see this thing, retrieve this attachment. When these attackers are going after clinical settings or hospital settings specifically, they will try to make stuff look like it came from a PACS system or from, another family health team that you might be associated with, or another health network, or an insurance provider. All of these things are great lures that you're going to click on because you want to see that data because it might be important. And so these targeted phishing attacks, we've seen big increases in that. A lot of dedicated targeted mail. Number of health records that you see there, I think is probably kind of low. That's probably just North America. That really stems from breaches into large health networks. And there were a number of memorable ones in 2019, 2020. Last year we saw the entire Vermont health system under attack and encrypted. The entire Irish health system as well too, the IHS, we saw that is currently undergoing a cyber attack right now and trying to recover. And 43% of cyber attacks target small business. That's actually skewed here in Canada. 97% of businesses are small businesses. Here north of the border, it's a bigger number, but globally, 43% of cyber attacks do target small businesses because of a lack of maturity in controls. So I'm just going to run quickly through some terminology you may or may not be familiar with. Malware is, as you see there, it's a group of software packages that have different malicious intent, hence malware, like software. Viruses, most commonly, we don't see a ton of computer viruses anymore. Nobody writes those anymore because they're not very profitable, but viruses historically have been very disruptive. I think Steve actually has a great story about that he might share later. I see Steve online. Ransomware is the topic du jour for everywhere in the world. The Colonial Pipeline attack, obviously. I mentioned the Vermont healthcare system, the Irish healthcare system right now, UK NHS. All have experienced ransomware attacks. And that is, as I mentioned earlier, when an attacker takes control of systems and locks you out of them through encryption so that you can't retrieve those files. And it's not really possible for companies like ours, even with really good reverse engineering capabilities these days, to decrypt those files. Usually a ransom has to be paid, or you have to restore from backup. And we'll talk about why that's so important later. Trojan horses typically are one piece of software masquerading as another piece of software, just like the fable. And then that second piece of software that's buried or baked into that piece of software has the ability to allow remote access to your network or do other malicious things. Spyware and keyloggers are what they say on the tin. They will allow people to monitor your behavior and activity. And worms are a category of virus that self-replicate, and they can be very, very disruptive. So something like that gets into a network and it just starts bouncing around. And until you have a way to patch that or remove it, it'll keep reinfecting systems. And it can also then go outwards to find other systems. And they can be very problematic. There's been some that have nearly crashed the entire internet due to the volume velocity. So spam, we're all very familiar with. I explained phishing a little bit earlier, targeted mail that looks like something that would be interesting or important to business operations. Spear phishing is more targeted above and beyond that. And that's where you're trying to get at a senior executive in an organization. Smishing and vishing are variations of that based on SMS and voicemail. And whaling is going after the heads of organizations, very senior level executives, or a large target, high net worth individual. Very quickly, DDoS, trying to knock computers off the internet. Bots and botnets are what enables that. Crypto mining, you've heard of Bitcoin. These are pieces of software that will try and get onto your systems to do that in the background so that the attackers can gain that value from using your systems. And credential stuffing is a form of trying to spray passwords into systems in order to gain access to those systems. And that goes very hand in hand with things like ransomware these days. So very quickly, I'll go through social engineering and kind of how it works. There's a lot of different variations on it, but when we think of the healthcare setting, largely what the threat actor here is trying to get at is health records. They are going to try and through manipulation of the end user in the clinic, be it reception, be it the clinician, be it whoever happened to pick up the phone or answer the email, they're going to try to gain access to health records, and they're going to do it through some sort of lure, some sort of story. And as the slide here, the third slide says, that exploitation phase, they're going to try and do it by creating what feels like a critical situation where if they don't get access to this information, then something is going to be lost, or there's going to be some sort of very negative consequence or outcome. Or potentially, some sort of threat. I'm going to sue you, right? Because I need access to my mother's health record. And that's really the kind of core of social engineering, is getting access to data that you shouldn't have access to through those illicit means. Largely these days, it's going to be through email. It's going to be through phone. Not likely somebody's going to walk into your clinic. So these are the types that we just talked about in the terminology. And these are the methods that we see quite often. Smishing is becoming more popular. People are able to find people's phone numbers now, and they will send text messages and try to get people to open links because people have access to sensitive data on their phones these days. So it's a different vector that we need to be more aware of. And in the clinical or call center setting, vishing is always super popular. Being able to manipulate people over the phone is always going to be a good attack vector.
Okay, great. Okay, so we have another set of questions. I just want to give people an opportunity to sign in if they'd like to play. We are basically playing for a cooler, an Igloo BMX cooler. If you need the information, it is in the chat, but you just need to go to www.classpoint.app. The class ID is 18611, and just enter your full name so that we know who is who. So there's no debate of which mic won. All right, so next question. How much did ransomware attacks worldwide rise in 2018? Okay, I'll give you that in a second. Here are your answer options. Okay. And, obviously the answer, obviously to us, the answer is 350%. Ransomware attacks have been just dramatically increasing over the past few years. They took a dip for a little while there, but it's back on the rise, and we're seeing a lot of attacks these days. Next question. What is the average cost of a ransomware attack on a business? So a small business typically, but we're really, it's most businesses in average, okay? The average of most businesses. So this would include not only it's the ransomware, but it potentially could be the cost of consulting services and so on. So it's not just a ransomware number. Okay, and the answer for that is B, and a lot of people did get this correct. 133,000 is the average.
I will throw an additional fun stat in there. Healthcare is the most expensive industry to remediate data breach, and the average cost to remediate a healthcare breach per record is around $350. So if you have 10,000 patients and all their data gets stolen, depending on where you are regulatorily and also the size of your network and stuff like that, it could cost you $350 times 10,000. So very expensive to remediate in the healthcare sector.
Thank you. Okay, last question in this batch. On average, how much time does it take to identify a breach? So how long does it take from the time you're infected until, let's just say it's your IT company figures out there's a breach, okay? Here are your options. Okay, and the answer to that is C, 7 months. Believe it or not, it takes on average 7 months to realize that you've actually been infected. Oftentimes attackers will get into your network and they will slowly move around looking for some valuable information. So it takes quite a bit of time. They do it slowly so that they're not detected and they can be in your environment for quite a while. Okay, back to you, Ian.
Awesome. So at a very high level, talk about passwords and the challenge with passwords. Passwords are what we have settled on for a variety of reasons as a means of non-repudiation. So proving that you are who you say you are when it comes to using a system. This is an evolving space right now, and we are starting to see some technology come out that helps make this better. But when we talk about passwords, we have to think about setting standards that make sense in today's operating environment. So a password like secret was never good, but it was somewhat acceptable maybe 20 years ago. Whereas today it takes, not a supercomputer, but a real high-powered computer with a couple graphics cards in it, less than, I think it's 30 seconds right now, to calculate every 6-character password that exists if we have an offline version of your password hashes. And that's something that we do all the time. Once we start doing penetration testing against people, we calculate their passwords and we find password 1, spring 2019. These are the common ones that we find. So passwords, the need for complexity has evolved. And it doesn't have to be so that you have to have some giant string of garbage that's really impossible to remember. You can go that route and you can use password managers. And that's a great approach if that works in your setting, in your clinical setting. As long as you don't have multiple people sharing those passwords, then you should be cool. But for your own personal use, your own personal email and Gmail or Office 365, whatever, password managers are a good approach. Otherwise, passphrases are great, and passphrases are just a couple common words that you would string together that aren't necessarily related. So if I was doing it based on what's on my desk, I would go microphone, water bottle, speakers. And that's never going to appear in a password list. And that is many characters strung together and would be very, very, very hard for a computer to calculate. It would take until the end of time right now for a computer to calculate that. So using something like that as a common passphrase, and then making sure that you're not using the same passphrase over and over and over in every site that we visit is a good approach. And again, we could blend that with a password manager as well too. Multi-factor authentication is mentioned here too, and that is also like a silver bullet almost to stopping a lot of hacking activity. Multi-factor authentication means that when I try to log into certain sites, it asks me to look up an app on my phone that rotates through numbers, and I put in that 6-digit code to go along with my passphrase. And if I can't produce that, then I can't log in. And that means that a hacker can't log into that site or service as well if they don't have that. There's also SMS-based ones, or sometimes even cool ones like push notification, where it's an app on your phone and it will just pop up and say, hey, you're trying to log in right now from this location, and you say yes. So having multi-factor authentication enabled on everything is super important. Just a plain password these days is not enough, especially if you use that password in multiple places. And there's a cool site you can check out called Have I Been Pwned? I'll put the link in the chat. And you can see if any of your passwords have been leaked related to any of the big data breaches. So you just put in your email address that you commonly use. You can put in your personal email addresses. Nobody's storing anything there or anything like that. Like nobody's trying to steal anything from you, but they'll tell you if your password or if your account appears in any of these data breaches. And if it does, you should be resetting your passwords. So this is rubber meets road where it comes to a healthcare setting. And Steve is going to give us a masterclass in this later. When we consider obligations and regulatory requirements that we have as custodians of healthcare, we think about ourselves in terms of a covered entity. A care provider, health plan, healthcare clearinghouse, anything like that, that maybe stores or transmits or maintains PHI. There are different terminologies for that depending on your geography, right? In Canada, we have health information network provider, or we have custodian. And there's a handful of other ones that would be applicable too, depending on the situation. Technical safeguards. This is the basis. Everything you see here on this slide actually is the basis of the security program that should be in place overall in an organization. And it's a blend of things. It's technical safeguards, which are cybersecurity related, and also partially policy and process driven. It is physical safeguards. As I mentioned earlier, the stolen laptop, there's a reason I mentioned that. It happens. I used to work in banking, and one day somebody kicked down the window at a branch and walked out with a server. Nobody had thought of that threat model, but it happened. So we had to figure out how to protect for it from in the future. And administrative safeguards really gets into that policy and people part of protecting health information in the organization. And all of these kind of make up this triad of things that you have to do, people, process, and technology, in order to build a security program to properly protect patient information.
All right, awesome, thank you. Okay, so last batch of questions. Okay, just 3 more questions to go. So what percentage of phishing messages get opened by targeted users? So, when somebody sends an email to somebody specific and they're phishing, what percentage of people actually open the email? Okay. Right, and the answer, and everybody got this one right, 30% of those messages actually get opened. And that's not to say you've been attacked or you've been compromised in any way, but somebody's actually opened the email instead of just deleting it. So of that 30% though, of the 30% of messages that get through, how many people actually, or how many percentage of people actually click on the attachment or the link, which is generally malicious? There. All right, so I think everybody's just going with the biggest numbers, but the reality is the answer is B. 12% of those people actually click on the attachment, which is a huge number if you think about it, with the amount of emails that get passed around day to day. If 12% of people are clicking on potentially risky emails and they're in the attachments and the links, that's why things are getting infected. Okay, last question. What is the most used email disguise for delivering malware or bad, bad sorts of messages? So is it disguised as one of these things? Okay, so most people said said C. The correct answer is actually A, bills and invoices. That's what most emails are coming in through that are malicious. Okay, so thank you for playing. We're almost finished the presentation. We have one more slide to go. We will announce the winner at the end of Steve's presentation, of course, because we're going to make you stay around.
Oh, I was muted. So on the left side of your screen, you see the right hand side. You see the CIA triad. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are core tenets that make up an information security program, anything to do with security in general. Who has access to what data? Is that data sound? And is that data available to me when I need it? These are the things that we have to balance when we build a security program. So how those relate, then we have to think about those different domains when we think of what we see beside it here, which is starting with policies, top-down creation of a security program. And we don't have to be super heavy with policy depending on the size of organization and setting, but we just have to cover off the things that we know are relevant and important to us. So in a clinical setting, one thing that we see a lot that hasn't been considered is like a personal device policy, especially now that more people are either working from home, bringing work home, or doing work using mobile devices that might belong to the employee, right? So a policy around the use of personal devices for work purposes and what that means to the employee and what that relationship with that data is might be an appropriate policy. And that would be probably like a sub policy or a standard that falls under an overarching cybersecurity policy or general IT policy. You don't have to go crazy, but you do have to put these things in place and then consider that triad. How does that affect my access to data, the confidentiality of data, all of those things. So this is where the consultative work that we do largely comes into place, because a lot of people haven't had experience in building out programs like this, but there's a lot of great guidelines and frameworks out there that we all base our work off: the CIS, CSC top 20 controls, NIST, ISO, things like that are all very applicable. The next things that you see below there in orange, these are kind of the core controls or practices that should be put in place to help protect an organization. If you're going to do anything, these are the ones that are important, largely for just about any organization. Employee training and awareness, some sort of learning management, some sort of gamification, some sort of annual training, but more frequent, I would recommend, is key. And is something that should be measurable within the organization, right? Did this person do it? Did they pass did they do it in 12 seconds because they know how to skip to the very end and, skip the questions, things like that. Email protection. We talked a lot about phishing and how it's the number one attack vector these days. So any sort of application or device that strips out bad attachments or filters for those things is super important. A firewall, the box that the ISP gave you that you plug into the wall and then it gives you the Wi-Fi, that is not really good enough to protect an organization from cyber attacks. It does not filter the types of stuff that attackers are capable of these days. It is merely a conduit to the internet. So some sort of commercial firewall that has rules and monitoring capability is really table stakes these days. Endpoint protection is software that goes onto your laptops, desktops, servers, and sometimes mobile devices that you can monitor that protects you from malware, from ransomware, the kinds of stuff that we've been talking about. An investment in that stuff is really crucial these days. And there's more advancements happening in that space than just about any space in cybersecurity these days. That's a continually evolving field. So buying a copy of Norton at Best Buy for $30, maybe not as good as some of the commercial stuff that's out there that's more potent these days, but you need to have something in place. And last but definitely not least, as we've talked a lot about ransomware and the importance of backups, having system and data backups that you can fall back to in the event of a ransomware attack or some sort of hacking attack that compromises your systems, and making sure that those backups can be separated from the rest of the network. Because one of the first things these attackers do is log in and delete your backups or corrupt your backups or encrypt your backups. So some sort of offline or remote cloud backup system that uses separate passwords is crucial these days. These are the things that you should be thinking about when you build a security program today. So thank you so much for listening to our part of the presentation. Gerard's not giving the prize away yet. We're gonna pass the mic to Steve. I'm going to introduce Steve as an esteemed colleague, and as I mentioned earlier, my former boss. Steve has more than 20 years experience in the healthcare space, in senior leadership roles directly in the technology space. He is one of the foremost experts probably in this province and maybe in this country around modernization, digitization of the health record and how that works in a clinical setting, in a hospital setting specifically. So I'll pass it over to Steve Hall and let him speak about where he is today and what he's doing. And but it's a real privilege to have him speak today. Thank you so much for doing this, Steve.
Pleasure. Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay? Thumbs up, Ian. Can you hear me okay? So thanks for taking time to connect with me today on cybersecurity. My name is Steve Hall. I'm the VP of Digital Health at William Osler Health System, which is a 3-site, 1,000-bed hospital in the Toronto area. I'll be speaking from my own experience today and offering some personal insights. I don't have an economic relationship with these good people, and I'm not compensated in any way. So what you're going to hear from me is really from my own experience. I'd like to kick it off by just highlighting a few recent incidents. Actually, maybe I'll take a step back. I've been in IT for about 32 years now, with 21 years as a CIO, and the last 18 in healthcare. And I've loved healthcare. I find it an incredibly rich and interesting place to work. And I'm still learning new things after 18 years. But in the years I've been in IT, I've seen just an incredible amount of change during the period. My first encounter with a virus was, with a computer virus, was in 1990. And I was responsible for the laboratory information systems of a testing lab that had about 50 technicians or so. And I managed all the computer systems associated with that. We had a virus that came in through MS Mail. I don't know how many people remember MS Mail, but it's an ancient product, and it infected about a dozen DOS-based PCs. As the computer guy, I was the one who responded to it and did my best to stop it from progressing further, and then had to go around and re-image all of the DOS PCs from floppy disks. It took about 40 hours. So there was 40 hours of my labor that went into that, and it was a really good, inexpensive first lesson in this. Fortunately, that virus was just purely a nuisance virus, which most of this stuff was back then. People really hadn't figured out how to turn it into a profitable enterprise at that point. Most people were writing viruses to gain fame or infamy and to get their name out there and to see if they could beat the big guy. That's what it was really all about back then. But in the 30 years since that, I've worked through two major cyber events in big environments, and they're really no different from smaller environments that you might find yourself in. In 2011, our hospital was hit by what's called a zero-day virus. And a zero-day virus just means it's a brand new virus. It's the 0 day. Nobody knows anything about it, and none of the antivirus software works because it hasn't been programmed to detect that behavior, that signature. It's just like COVID was at the beginning. Nobody knew anything about it. And that virus, in a couple of hours, disabled 2,900 PCs on our network. And that was on day 2 of my job with the organization. And it took about 7 weeks of all hands on deck effort to go around and re-image all the PCs, get the virus completely out of the environment, and do all the patching and protective measures that we needed to assure that the hospital would continue to run. In 2019, our organization was hit with a ransomware attack, which fortunately was caught and contained. In 2019, we were in a higher state of readiness for this stuff. We'd spent money on information security. We had purchased really good software for the PCs that detect this kind of stuff, and we managed to stop it after just a couple of PCs had been infected. So it wasn't a huge deal, but if we had not taken those steps, that ransomware would have spread across the entire enterprise. So some really significant events have hit the media in the past while. You may have heard about this one involving something called solar winds. And when this hit, it really shocked a lot of people. Solar winds is a network management tool, and if you have a big IT environment, you have something like this in your environment that actually runs the environment. The solar winds attack, basically the cyber criminals injected some malicious software into the SolarWinds software, so that when it was distributed to SolarWinds customers, that was the way they got in. It came in as an update, and then it spread across their network. And it was many months before this was detected, and this made it into some of the best data centers in the U.S. Very professionally managed data centers with very high-profile clients, including Homeland Security and a number of major U.S. government sites, as well as well-known private clients. This was a new idea, and it was highly successful, and it makes you wonder how many other times it's been tried, but and we just don't know about it. Second one, perhaps a little more in our field. In May of 2021, Scripps Health was hit by a ransomware attack triggering a federal investigation. Their systems came under attack on May the 1st. And that prompted a massive rescheduling of services within that institution. They couldn't get access to anything. Patient records were not accessible. You didn't know who was coming to the hospital that day for an ambulatory care appointment. It took about 5 weeks to remediate it, with only the patient portal coming back, I think in mid-June, so 6 or 7 weeks before they were fully available again. And then lastly, a very interesting one in California, perhaps a little closer to home for this group. In the summer of 2019, California-based Wood Ranch Medical was hit by a ransomware attack that affected their office computers and their EHR. And after several months of effort, clinical leadership determined that it would not be possible to recover the encrypted patient records. And as a result, they permanently closed the practice in December of 2019. And if you visit their website today, you'll find advice to patients regarding how to obtain free credit reports, but copies of their health record are not available. And the credit reports are offered because when hackers steal information, as Ian mentioned earlier, if they can't use it themselves directly, they'll sell it to other people who can. And identity theft is still a pretty significant issue out there. So Wood Ranch Medical is still offering affected patients free credit reports. So why are so many of these things happening right now? They seem to be happening every day. They're definitely happening in every country. And they're hitting every kind of business and organization. No one is protected or immune to this. And it's probably much more extensive than we know about. And certainly not everything makes the media. So why are so many things happening now? And the answer is simple. It's fueled by Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but particularly Bitcoin. And essentially what's happened is Bitcoin has made it possible for hackers to receive payments in a very anonymous way. And it's made it a safe and highly profitable enterprise for many large hacking groups around the world. And they are incredibly sophisticated in terms of how they run their business. But this is fundamentally what's behind them. And yesterday a Bitcoin was worth 38,000 US. So as the price of this goes up, and as you probably know, it's gone up pretty significantly over the past couple of years, so does the cost to the victim, and so do the profits of the hacker. So Bitcoin is one of a number of cryptocurrencies, but it's certainly the most commonly traded one. And you have to ask yourself, who needs untraceable currency? Well, thieves and terrorists need untraceable currency. And who needs untraceable digital currency? Well, cyber thieves and cyber terrorists. And that's what's behind all of this. You should ask yourself the question, will this happen to me? My EMR is hosted by an IT company, a big IT company, and I trust them. The SolarWinds breach that I told you about earlier has really cast a lot of doubt on whether or not these hosting entities can be fully relied upon. As I mentioned, some of the best and most professionally managed data centers in the world were hit by that. So your EMR, even if it's hosted by someone else, is not immune to attack. You may also have a good local IT service company that handles your PCs and does your backups. And it's a really common service model. It's common where I am too. And these smaller companies can be great. They deliver great service. You get to know them when you have a problem. They're there quickly, and they're usually able to figure out what the issue is pretty quickly and get you back in business. But although this is a common model, it's an easy target for hackers. These folks are really good at providing help desk services, but they're not cybersecurity experts. Some may offer cybersecurity services, but certainly not all are adept in this space. You might also take the view that I'm safe because healthcare is a public service. It is a noble calling, and surely they won't attack me. But as I think you heard earlier, healthcare is actually the target of choice now for many folks. And I think there's three simple reasons behind this. Number one, they think you're an easy target because you probably don't spend very much money on IT security. You'll spend a lot of money fixing it when it goes bad, but you don't spend very much on it today, likely. Most hospitals don't. And so you're an easy target. Secondly, you have very high value information. Once they get into your organization, the information that they'll be looking for will certainly be patient records. It'll be billing information, could be credit card information, names and addresses of employees. This is really high value stuff. And thirdly, they think you have money. They think you have the ability to pay. And so healthcare is absolutely not a safe space in this respect. You have to pay attention to this. So what actually happens in a cyber attack? Well, Ian's described a wide range of different attack types, but there's two in particular that I would commend to your attention: this thing called ransomware and basic theft of personal health information. And ransomware is simply where they send one of your employees an email saying, oh, you've got a package here from UPS. And it's plausible that the employee might be expecting a package from UPS. Click here to acknowledge delivery or allow us to deliver without a signature. And so they click on the link, and unknown to them, a program is downloaded in the background that encrypts all of the files that they have access to, and potentially launches an even more sophisticated attack where it's replicated across the enterprise, and ultimately all of the files in the organization are encrypted. And the second one, theft of personal health information, is perhaps the most chilling one. And that is where they steal personal health information of your patients and send you an email saying, I've stolen the following information from your systems. Here's an example. Here's Mr. Smith's health record. And if I don't hear from you by next Tuesday, with payment of a Bitcoin in some amount, 2, 3, 5 Bitcoin, I'm going to post all of these health records. I have 100,000 of them. I'm going to post all of them on WikiLeaks or some site like that. A ransomware attack sort of looks like this. On the left is a Windows view of just a directory that I happen to use, and I've got a couple of hundred files. There's 1,973 files in there. It's all my spreadsheets, it's all my presentations, my Word documents, and so on. And this stuff is important to me. And then on the right is what happens to all of those files. In an encryption attack, all those files disappear, and then they appear as one single file that has a very, very long name. And when you try to click on it, it'll say, you need the encryption key to access these files again. And here's an email address, and we're going to charge you 0.5 Bitcoin or 0.2 Bitcoin or whatever, and multiply that by $36,000, and that's what it'll cost you. And that's what happens in a ransomware attack. And if you happen to be an administrator within a medical office, those files are everything that the office uses. And so all of the files in the office are encrypted into that file. And it's very, very quick. And you won't notice it happening either. In a theft of personal health information attack, this is something that happened in Canada in late 2019. Life Labs is a very large medical laboratory service that physicians everywhere send their patients to for lab testing. They're right across the country. And cyber thieves broke into the systems at Life Labs, and they downloaded millions of records, and then sent leadership at Life Labs an email saying what they were going to do. That was, they were going to disclose the records publicly if they didn't receive a payment. And it took months and months and months for Life Labs to work through this. They never really said publicly what they did in response to it, but the word on the grapevine is they paid up. They paid the hackers their ransom demand and had the assurance of the hackers that the information would not be disclosed. I honestly don't know what that's worth, but that's what they received. I was a patient, and some of my records were affected in LifeLabs, so I got a letter from the CEO of LifeLabs and an offer to have my credit monitored in case the information was used for identity theft. Anyways, it cost LifeLabs probably tens of millions of dollars to work through this ultimately, and it was a huge blow to the confidence that the community had in them. And if you're in a smaller medical practice and this happens to you, you will very rapidly lose the confidence of your patients. So let's pause for a second, think about what actually happens during a cyber attack in your office. And I've seen this unfold, and this is kind of how it goes. You come in one morning and nothing's working. Your EMR might be hosted by somebody off-site. It might well be working, but you can't access it. Your PCs aren't working. You can't get access to critical test results that you may have ordered on patients overnight. You don't know what your appointments are. Patients are going to start showing up at your door one after the other, and you'll just have to manage the day's schedule based on that. Your PCs won't work. You won't have email, and if you do your own payroll, or even if you have someone else do your payroll, and you do your own data entry for payroll, you won't be able to run payroll. This is probably the only thing in your office that's going to work. You'll be doing specimen labeling manually. You'll be paying your staff and your vendors, the people that supply you with the stuff you need to run your practice by check. So ultimately, you're responsible for this, and you're legally liable. So what do? Do you try to recover from backups? Well, if your IT service provider is good, or you have an internal IT department, hopefully your backups worked. It's been my experience that 20 to 30% of the time the backups don't work. Everybody thought they were working fine. They seem to run fine. And you go to use them and they're not usable for some reason, and you don't care what the reason is. The point is they don't work, and that happens in far too many cases in my experience. So are you going to pay the ransom? And if you're going to pay the ransom, do you actually know how to buy Bitcoin and how to transfer that Bitcoin to the cyber thief? It takes, if you're not familiar with this, you're looking at 7 to 10 days to get all that done before you're going to get an encryption code back on your files. It's way easier and way cheaper just to protect yourself. The things that I'm just going to walk through here are some simple things that you can do to protect your clinical environment. They are pretty straightforward, I think, and they will go a long way toward helping you to maintain cyber safety in your environment. Doing these things is the equivalent of locking your front door and putting the bolt on, and closing the windows down and turning the alarm on. They won't keep North Korean spies out of your environment. A well-resourced hacker who really wants to get into your environment will get in. The NSA can get in truly anywhere they want to get in. But the average cyber attack is opportunistic, and if you're just a little bit too difficult, a little bit too much work, they will go away and they'll just move on to somebody else who's easier to break into. So if you do these things, I believe you put yourself into that position where you're too much trouble, and they'll simply move on. Number one, train your staff in good cyber hygiene. Don't assume that people know what safe computer practices are. Why would they? You really do need to train people on this. Part of the training is in helping people become aware of what the current threats are and the way these threats work. And when people know that, they won't do the stupid thing and click on the link that they shouldn't click on. Do use strong passwords and change them regularly. Passwords are an excellent form of defense. My greatest hope is that in 5 years from now, we will have no passwords anymore. I have about 80 passwords in my life for all the systems I use, and you know, my gas station card account and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of them out there, and my hope is that ultimately they'll be replaced by something better. But until that time, do use strong passwords. They'll feel like an annoyance, but change them regularly. Your two strongest passwords should be the password you use at work and the password you use to get access to your bank accounts. Install virus software, malware programs on all of your PCs and keep them updated. Most of these programs come with a feature that allow you to turn on auto update, and that will they'll just keep getting the updates regularly, and you won't have to do anything. They'll be good and current. Number 4, this was really popular in our hospital when we did this. Ban all webmail at work. Don't let your staff log into Hotmail or whatever their email is using a web browser from work, because those are simply not safe, and they present a really convenient route of entry into your organization. Pretty much everyone has a smartphone today, and people who want to look at their email on lunch can do that, but they should use their smartphone. Don't use your work computer to do that. Challenge your vendors and or your IT staff on what I would call the fundamentals. That's a couple of slides from now, but it's fairly simple stuff. You should be asking hard questions of the people that provide these services to you. Even if you have a great working relationship and you trust them, you need to be asking these questions, because if you don't and something goes bad and you're legally liable for something and you didn't do your due diligence with your vendors, you've got a big problem. And lastly, consider buying some cyber insurance. This is becoming increasingly common and widely available, and it'll cover you for things like ransom that you have to pay, the cost of monitoring the credit reports of people who have whose information has been compromised, and it'll help offset a lot of the office costs that you'll face in responding to it. It might even cover lost income and revenue. If you look into this, and you can do it through the same people that sell you your liability insurance, they will probably give you a questionnaire and ask you a bunch of questions related to how safe your computing environment is. So a lot of organizations have that now, and I recommend it. So that's at work. There's a bunch of things you can and should do to protect yourself while you're at home as well. Whether you're Mac or PC, definitely have antivirus and anti-malware software installed in your computer. I happen to use AVG. It's free and it's pretty decent. You can install it for free and run it for free. They will try and sell you all kinds of advanced features, and you can buy them if you want, but you can get pretty decent basic antivirus, anti-malware protection from them. You should go to Apple and Microsoft websites to download the Windows and Mac OS updates, or better yet, turn them on so they happen automatically, and they tend to happen at 2 a.m. On most Windows computers. Just like at work, use caution on email and web browsing. Back up your files monthly. That's hard for a lot of people because most people don't have good backup software on their computer. If you're like me, I've got a couple of home computers, and my particular computer has bank statements and utility bills and spreadsheets and hundreds of family photographs, videos from when my kids were young, stuff that's pretty precious to me. And so what I do is I put them all into one folder on my desktop. And then I take one of these USB drives that's pictured here. This is a 2 terabyte Seagate drive for $100 at Staples. And I plug it in and I drag and drop those files as one folder onto the Seagate drive. It works just like a USB key. And then very importantly, I unplug it when it's done, so that if I get hit with a ransomware attack, my backups are not encrypted. And then lastly, get your free credit report annually. Equifax and TransUnion have reach across North America. I think they're the two biggest, and in both the US and Canada, you are entitled to receive your credit report once per year for free. And you can go to their websites to do that. They'll try and sell you all kinds of stuff. You can buy it if you like, but I get the free credit report for myself and for my wife annually, and it comes in the mail. And mine's about 10 pages long, and it's basically a long list of all of the various bank accounts that I've had over the years, credit cards, car loans, mortgages, all that kind of stuff. And you should be able to read through that report and not have any surprises. So you should recognize everything that's on that report. And if you don't, you need to follow up. You need to call the company at issue and find out what's going on. But a credit report is a great way to find out whether or not your identity has been compromised. And then lastly, I'm not going to go through this whole slide. It includes some of the things that we've talked about. Use this as a checklist if you'd like with your vendor or your IT folks. There's two particular in bold there that I would commend your attention to that are just really, really important, and don't take weak answers on these. Patch your systems weekly and do emergency patches when they are released. Patches are the vaccine of the computer world. When manufacturers realize there's a vulnerability in their software, they issue patches and they're free, and you should install them because they cure the vulnerability. And then lastly, test your backups. It is almost useless to do your backups and just read the log file and say, yep, backup worked okay. You need to do the reverse periodically, or your IT people need to do the reverse, which is to put in the tape or mount the drive that has the backups on it and try pulling that software back off and try to restart the system that had been backed up. And if that works, then you know your process is pretty good. At our hospital, we exercise that on 3 systems twice a year. We have 500 systems, but you might think about doing it or having your IT people do it once or twice a year. So Ian and Gerard, that's it for my remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Steve. Gerard, I'll pass it over to you to close this out. Did we lose Gerard? Gerard, you're on mute, sir. Unless he's maybe having internet problems. Okay, if there is any questions, let me see. Peter asked a question: is Life Labs less vulnerable now? Is Dynacare any less vulnerable? Life Labs definitely. I'll speak in broad strokes here. I was able to attend a session where the director of security for Life Labs spoke pretty openly to a group about the experience and putting the organization back together. They learned a lot of hard lessons during that. They have spent a lot of money and building and time and process energy in building a far more robust security monitoring system, in being more proactive in their security approach. I think that was lacking greatly. So being proactive, as Steve mentioned, is things like patch management and backups and things like that, but it's also testing your security regularly. And Life Labs was not doing that to the meaningful extent that they needed to based on the risk profile of the organization. So as a large entity, as a large organization, they have a lot of moving parts, and a good attacker is going to figure out what all those parts are and find weaknesses. And that's what ultimately happened to Life Labs, is somebody was able to get access. And then, as you heard earlier, people can be in your network for 7 months before you know they're there. And Life Labs was also lacking in some of the ability to monitor what was going on inside that network at a deep level. So that's how Life Labs kind of happened. And they have gone to a lot of effort to remediate that because they were under a lot of scrutiny. And so they are in a much more secure place. Dynacare, you would honestly need to ask people with a bit of insider knowledge there, or take a look and see if they do publish things like their security policies, like their, or make public statements about their security practice, and the efforts that they make to protect themselves. Otherwise, everybody puts a veneer out of doing a lot about security. Everybody's website's like, yeah, we use encryption. Well, everybody does in transit, but not many people encrypt their data as it's sitting there. So taking face value as to some proclamation on a website, maybe not. But if somebody goes to the extent to post a little bit about their security practices, or maybe shares a blog post about what they're doing around security, that tells me that they're thinking about it and that they might have some good processes and technology in place to protect themselves. So that's what I'll say about Life.
That's great. I'm back to life again. Thanks. There's another quick question. I know we're running very long on time, so just another quick question from Mokare. Which antivirus are you recommending for an average office?
Gerard, you guys are solutions experts. What do you guys sell to your clients these days?
It's a tough question, because what is an average office? And if you're looking at a small office, and I unmuted Jeff, who's one of my engineers, if you're a small office, you may not be able to afford the best enterprise solutions out there. For large offices, we like to promote CrowdStrike and Palo Alto solutions, but again, they're not necessarily cost effective for small clinics. We do have a managed service offering that will make those things a little bit more affordable, but we won't dig into that too much here. Jeff, do you have any foresight, any input on that?
Yeah, so historically, CrowdStrike just wasn't affordable for small offices. They actually did come out with a small business version that doesn't have the full feature set of the enterprise version, but it at least covers enough that it is probably one of the stronger ones you can get for a small business.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? As I said, I know we're running late. I know everybody wants to know who won. So just, if there's any other questions, throw it up in the chat. Just a few things to close off. Number one, I want to thank Ian and especially Steve for hosting and presenting their information. Again, we hope that you found this valuable, found this entertaining and interesting. And we do intend to do more of these and dig deeper into some of these risks and some of the things that you need to think about. Everybody who attended, yes, we absolutely will be receiving your gift card. We have the attendance list, so we will email that to you. It's most likely going to be an Amazon card. So rest assured. Okay, no other questions. Then let's. I'm going to present again. I'll show you who won. I think I'm presenting. Can you see my screen again? Anybody? Okay, I'm going to assume that people can see my screen. The winner of the game, is Peter John. I don't want to butcher your name, but I put the top three up there. Those are the top three participants. So thank you, Peter. We will contact you. We will make arrangements to get the cooler out to you. Okay. Last but not least, if you do want to learn a little bit more about a managed service offering, that some of the controls that Ian talked to, we do provide that in a managed service offering. Check out our securesolutionsnow.com website. It's live. You can get some more information on that. And Source 44 also does a podcast called All Things Being Cyber. Next month, we are going to focus on healthcare. Maybe we'll get Steve on again. We'll see. So if you don't, check that out on Spotify or on iTunes. We'd appreciate you listening, and hopefully, again, you learned something. So I'm going to turn it over to Ian. If you have anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up. I'm going to assume no, she's muted or frozen. So once again, thank you very much, everybody. Again, thanks again to Steve. We will, we will hopefully see you soon and in our next presentation.